Okay, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to each and every one of you. Welcome to UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei's inaugural SBTi Symposium, Demystifying Urgent Actions for a 1.5 degrees Pathway. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jess. I am the lead for research and advocacy at UNGC NYB, and I'll be your MC for today's session. So I hope all of you are already geared up for today's exciting session and are looking forward to understand more about the Science-Based Targets Initiative and to clarify any questions that we have from the speakers. So ladies and gentlemen, we have seen more and more natural disasters happening in recent years caused by the change of our climate. Malaysia's most recent once in 100 years floods that hit several states is just one of the many examples which has brought misery and the loss of lives. And I believe that all of us have gathered here today with the same purpose in mind. We want a better future for ourselves as well as for our future generations. And as leaders of both large and small organizations, each of us has a very important role to play. So one of the more important methods to prevent the worst impact of climate change and to future-proof your business is by setting increasingly aggressive emission reduction targets, which are in line with climate science. So that is the science-based targets. So our intent for this symposium is threefold. Number one is to present you with the latest updates on SBTi. And number two is to discuss about how companies can decarbonize by 2050 through the SBTs. And number three is for you to be aware of global initiatives such as Race to Zero and how SBTi fits into the larger picture. So not only that, this event is an opportunity to manifest meaningful partnerships. And so we welcome all of you here who are physically present today to please get together and introduce yourself to each and one another. So for those of you who are not sure about who we are, I'll direct you to the screen. UN Global Compact is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative with over 15,000 members in over 160 countries. UNGC calls for companies to align their strategies and goals to the 10 principles, which revolves around human rights, labor, environment, anti-corruption, and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. UNGC NYB is part of UN Global Compact. Locally, we have more than 130 members, including Sarawak Energy Berhad, Bursa Malaysia, EcoWorld, HSBC Amanah, MinConsult, Diatronic Energy, MRCB, and more, with a collective market cap of over 100 billion ringgit Malaysia. And we aspire to work with any Malaysian companies, large and small, that have the aspiration to be both sustainable as well as profitable. Our commitment and purpose is to awaken organizations and individuals to activate sustainable initiatives and to accelerate SDG ambition. UNGC is one of the founding members of SBTi, along with other organizations such as CDP, WWF, and World Resources Institute. Together, we advocate for more businesses to adopt science-based targets for their target setting. So now, I would like to quickly go through some housekeeping rules for our audience today. So for those of you who are tuning in online, if your video or audio clarity is disrupted, please check your device settings and relogging if necessary. And if you have any questions during our Q&A, feel free to type them out in the Q&A chat box. And three, kindly note that this session will be recorded. And for those of you who are physically present here today, for Q&A session, you are encouraged to raise your hand and we will pass you the mic to address any of the questions that you have for the audience, for the speakers. And number two is, although we have transitioned to an endemic phase, SOP still applies. So ensure you wear your face mask at all times and keep a 1 meter distance if possible. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Faraz Nada, Executive Director of UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei on stage to deliver his welcoming remarks.
Mr. Muhammad Irwan, Board Member, UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, Prof. Kong Kok Wei, Executive Dean, Taylor's Business School, Mr. Jivan Raju, Country Head TCS Malaysia, Mr. Muhammad Nazrul Izzam Mansor, Group CEO, FGV Holdings Berhad, Datuk Dr. Dennis Ganendra, CEO Min Consult, Mr. Tam Chi Aun, Group CEO, Detrolic Energy Holdings, respected members of UN Global Compact, distinguished guests, Assalamualaikum, Salam Ramadan, and a good afternoon to all. Today, I have the privilege to welcome you to the first SBTi event done in Malaysia. Let me just take this out since I'm quite distant. This is also the first time we are doing a hybrid event, so I apologize in advance if there is some technical issues. We chose the 5th of April because today is also UN's International Day of Conscience, an apt word in our battle against climate change. For me, climate action has two sides. One is the view that has always been at the forefront, the technical side, where we often hear of complex terms such as scope 1, 2, and 3, carbon sequestration, net zero, and of course, science-based targets. The often hidden side is I would say, the humanized side, underrated terms that is often invisible, yet critical in our journey against climate change: leadership, value, conscience. Without this soft side, urgent sustainable actions would be lost to paralysis by analysis, and there would be fixation of finding the perfect ROI path, which will never be found. That is why on this Day of Conscience, we wanted to organize a somewhat complex sounding symposium to show that peel away all the technical layers, what is needed is the human emotion of wanting to do what is right, despite the obstacles in its way. To fix an intergenerational issue, to be proactive, to be a true global citizen, and to do so with an ingrained intent rather than a by-the-way approach. It will be our conscience that will motivate us to understand the technical complexities and, more importantly, take the needed steps to make our businesses to be climate friendly. And the window for action is becoming smaller and smaller. Just yesterday, the recent IPCC report has highlighted some bad news. That even if all existing carbon cutting policies put in place by the end of 2020 are met, we would still see global warming of 3.2 degrees. But the good news is, in the same report, it says that it's still not too late to act. And we need to consciously accept we only have till 2025 for emissions to peak before we need to ensure it takes a significant downward trajectory if we are to achieve a 1.5 degree pathway. Hence, while having a long-term net zero target is applaudable, this must be coupled with solid short to mid-term targets that align to science-based of climate change, or better known as the science-based targets. Over the course of this symposium, we have several subject matter experts who will help to demystify this often complex-sounding initiative. I'm also delighted that we have a stellar lineup of Malaysian CEOs and business leaders who have committed to setting SBTs, and they will share how this global agenda is relevant in our localized context. We will also welcome the 12th SBT committee in Malaysia to this leading network of climate action leaders. Lastly, we shall witness the launch of the Zero C digital tool designed to make climate action as easy as possible for all business actors. All this is demonstration that urgent climate action is possible when we are consciously driven to make a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, before I end, I take this opportunity to thank the SBTi Symposium sponsors, FGV, Min Consult, and Detrolic, our knowledge partners, UNFCCC and Taylor's University, who were also very kind in providing the venue. And we chose this venue so that we all can feel a little bit younger today. And the excellent fine dining quality iftar food packs that has been done by their fine dining students. I also thank all the speakers for being here to share their knowledge and experience. And I thank the 500 plus registered virtual participants for taking time to learn about science-based targets. Our thanks to EPU and YB Minister for supporting us. And last but not least, to TCS for their partnership in providing all of us a climate action tool localized to the Malaysian context. I hope you will find the rest of the session beneficial and looking forward to welcoming future SBT committers on board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Faros. May we now invite Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri Mustafa Mohamed in the Prime Minister's Department Economy to deliver his opening speech and officially launch the Zero C Carbon Emissions Management Platform. Unfortunately, Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri is currently performing his Umrah, so he's unable to join us physically at the event today. As such, he'll be tuning in virtually. So to the physical audience, may I now direct your attention to the screen.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon. Mr. Faros Nada, Executive Director, UN Global Compact Network, Malaysia and Brunei. Mr. Muhammad Nazrul Izzam Mansor, Group CEO, FGV Holdings Berhad. Mr. Jivan Raju, Country Head, Tata Consultancy Services, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be invited to deliver the opening address for the launch of Malaysia's first science-based target initiative, or SBTi Symposium, as well as the launch of Zero C, a digital emission management platform. Our topic here today will center around the importance of having economic resilience while championing the continuity and survival of mankind. Ladies and gentlemen, over the years, the topic of climate change has evolved from being a simple buzzword to being a fundamental issue that requires urgent attention from all levels of policy making and business operations. Nations and corporations alike are rushing to embark on a journey towards a net zero world. In Malaysia, focus and awareness towards climate change have grown exponentially. The government has been at the forefront of introducing effective policies to combat climate change whilst ensuring fair and equitable growth. Our socio-economic development plans are tailored to include the Sustainable Development Principles. Malaysia's transition towards renewable energy was first highlighted in the 8th Malaysia Plan during the period 2001-2005. It continues to be a key element in the 12th Malaysia Plan. In addition to the 5-year plans, the National Policy on Climate Change, Malaysia, and the National Green Technology Policy have been introduced as part of the government's commitment to become a low-carbon nation and supporting green growth. Additionally, incentives in the form of green investment tax allowances, GITA, and green income tax exemption, GTA, have been used to strengthen the development of green technology in Malaysia. Nevertheless, policies and initiatives by the government can only go so far as to make a long-lasting impact to climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, addressing climate change requires involvement and teamwork from all stakeholders. Establishing strategic partnerships between the government, the private sector, and the civil society are necessary if we are to meet the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and the Paris Climate Agreement targets. Corporations, in particular, play a pivotal role in driving green growth. Business practices have long been associated with the world's triple planetary crisis of climate change, environmental pollution, and biodiversity loss. In recent years, the world has witnessed a proliferation of net zero pledges among businesses. Around 21% of the world's 2,000 largest public companies have committed to meeting net zero targets. The Science-Based Target Initiative, SBTi, a partnership between the CDP, the UN Global Compact, World Resources Institute, and the Worldwide Fund for Nature, has become the gold standard for monitoring corporate climate pledges. SBTi is a target-setting mechanism, a clearly defined pathway for companies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which in turn helps to prevent the worst impacts of climate change. It has resulted in the development of ambitious climate change actions by the private sector, enabling them to set emission reduction targets based on the latest climate science, which are consistent with the Paris Climate Agreement. It also allows companies to translate net zero pledges into corporate targets with specific timelines. Launched in the year 2015 and driven by numerous reputable organizations, the usage of SBTi has seen rapid growth, with over 2,600 companies worldwide committing to setting targets with SBTi. I am proud to witness the increasing number of Malaysian companies who are committing to these ambitious targets. Being the pioneers in their respective industries, They are leading the change to achieve Malaysia's climate aspirations, positively contributing to the target of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Today, we have the leaders from these companies to share their respective journeys and experiences. I hope that these sessions will be able to inspire more stakeholders to take positive steps in tackling climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, we must not take the issue of climate change for granted. We are all affected. Urgent action must be taken now. We must join hands to collaboratively solve this climate emergency. Let us work together in building a greener world and preserve economic prosperity for future generations. On that note, I would like to take this opportunity to commend the UN Global Compact Network, Malaysia and Brunei, and Tata Consultancy Services Asia Pacific for working together in developing the Zero C tool, a digital emission management platform for greenhouse gas reduction, which will facilitate businesses in the transition to net zero. Lastly, I would like to applaud all of you for being a part of this landmark event to fight against climate change. I wish you every success in your climate journey. Thank you.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The Zero C Carbon Emissions Management Platform is officially launched. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us now welcome Mr. Jeevan Raju, Country Head of Tata Consultancy Services Malaysia, as well as Advisor to UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, on stage to give a speech about Zero C. Please give him a round of applause.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, to all distinguished guests here today, thank you for being part of this particular ceremony. But more importantly, I think you've dedicated your time for climate change, and we really appreciate that. It's very refreshing to walk into a college or university after so many years. It immediately takes away 20 years of your life, and you feel far more younger and vibrant. So I walked in thinking so many things about the office, and I walked into a university, and you feel far more 20 years younger, much more vibrant, less baggage on the shoulder, and you think, hey, you can conquer the world. And that's what all of us aspired when we were in university. And then you get into the corporate world, and you get caught up with so many things, and next thing you know, this burden, the shoulder that you have becomes much more heavier, and what you set off to do during your university days about changing the world is completely forgotten, because now you're trying to change the people, motivate the people, make sure your revenues are right, your collections are great, and you can win the next deal. That's how life has changed us so much. But what is very important is the fact that the pandemic has also awakened us to make us believe that we are all connected in some shape or form. Pandemic started in China, and we thought it was a Chinese problem. It spread very quickly to different parts of the region, and we thought it's perhaps a regional problem. It's not going to impact us. But last 2 years, it has shown that this pandemic and this world is all part of a larger family, and that has caught us by surprise. It has created a huge turmoil in civil society. It's created a huge impact in businesses itself. Many businesses have closed down for whatever reason. Many companies have closed down. Many people have lost their life. It's a stark reminder to remind ourselves a pandemic that started in China has impacted the world. Likewise, in our hands, we have the climate problem with us. It's not an American problem. It's not a Europe problem. It's not a China problem. It's not an India problem. It's our problem. And we all, in our own small ways, need to do this for the next generation of youngsters who are watching us as leaders in the corporate circle, in our own respective community, in our own respective fields and families. I have 2 young daughters with me, 11 and 6, and they observe more than they hear more. They watch what I do, then watch what I say. Likewise, in your respective organization, you have many youngsters who are watching us as leaders in what we do as opposed to what we say. And that has a huge significant impact in how we attract talent into business and how we keep the next generation focused on the right thing. We, from TCS, Tata Consulting Malaysia, we've been working very closely with Feroz, UNGC over the last couple of years to make believe that we need to do something in Malaysia. We can't look out for other countries to lead the way, and we want to lead the way, importantly. Secondly, it is also important to us to start doing things as opposed to talking about things. There's a lot of talk going around about climate change, COP26, a lot of talk is going around. But we, as leaders in this particular forum, in organization, we need to start doing things. And I'm proud to say that today in Malaysia, we probably have 5 large organizations in various fields taking a plunge, daring to be different, daring to address the climate issue that they have in their own respective companies. I applaud them, I salute them for being leaders, because it's first time ever in Malaysia that we've embarked into something of such nature. Now, these 5 companies come from biotechnology companies, they come from energy companies, they come from construction companies. They all have put their hands together to go back to their own respective home to fix it. You will know who they are. And I think it's a true testament in how UNGC has played a pivotal role in bringing technology companies like us to the business to address a larger goal in this world. It's not going to end here, and we're not going to stop now. Our journey with UNGC is just started. We want to make sure that every public listed company in Malaysia or large enterprise in Malaysia are onboarded on this climate journey. It's not a nice to have function or a feature. It'll be a must to have in the coming years for 2 particular reasons. Today, we work with 2 largest banks in Malaysia. And the first thing they got us to do is we want to rehash our procurement policy to be much more sustainable. We only want to give sustainable loans. We only want to have vendors who are sustainable. And we want to make sure we all have all this auditable in a system. And we built the system for them. It's our two largest banks in Malaysia. Moving forward, we work with the energy companies, and they are monitoring every vendor that they have, whether they are green adverse or not. So you can see gradually, but surely things are changing. If the 900 companies that we have in Bursa embarks into this climate change, it will make sure that Malaysia is the foreground for capital investment. Capital investment from capital markets, from pension funds around the world will come and park their money here, because everyone from Blackstone to many other pension funds from Canada, they are looking for sustainable investments. And that is happening right now. Feroz and I talk to the SMEs very regularly, and we tell them, first thing, get your house ready for sustainability. Start looking at it, because if you don't, you will soon lose out on contracts. That we see in the banking fraternity, that soon you will see in the energy fraternity, that people will start asking for your SDG scores, your GRI reports before we sign up a large contract with you. So that is the impact it'll have on enterprises in the coming years. So what we said, hey, if that's going to happen, then what do? We have to do something for the enterprises. And UN Global Impact, together with TCS, we worked together and we came up with a platform called Zero C. Everybody wants to know how to be healthy, but nobody wants to go and see a doctor and tell how unhealthy they are. Everybody wants to be Mr. Fitness, but nobody wants to see a doctor and say how bad your cholesterol levels are or how bad your diabetic levels are. So Zero C is literally doing that for your enterprise. We put a platform to measure your carbon footprint as an enterprise, how much of water, electricity, transportation, gas, how much your people use services, which contributes towards carbon footprint. If every enterprise can see what they have as a footprint, only then they are able to make the change into the corrective measures. So what is Zero C? Zero C is simply a platform that checks your company's cholesterol, your company sugar level, your company diabetic level, and see whether you guys are healthy in the world of climate change, so that you can make corrective checks, corrective ramifications that you need to do within your organization. And then you can take that whole step of whether giving carbon offsets or changing your processes or changing your business to some extent. And that's what Carbon Zero C. And we were very, very, very generous and said we will build this for free for a couple of our people, partners of UNGC. And we've done that, and we've proven some phenomenal results. I hope you get to see some of those results soon. Moving forward, I hope we all leave this hall feeling younger, knowing that you need the zeal, the energy, and the passion, and the mindset that you can conquer the world. And we plan to conquer the world with Zero C in our own small way. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for all the leaders from various organizations here today for supporting this particular cause, because it's a cause bigger than Malaysia. It's a cause bigger for the universe. Thank you so much. Salam Sejahtera, and hope you have a great day today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jeevan. I'm glad that you are feeling younger when you're in Taylor's. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, FGV Holdings Berhad It's the first food and agriculture company in Malaysia to formalize the commitment by signing the United Nations-backed Science-Based Targets Initiative business ambitions for a 1.5 degrees Celsius pledge. This is also the most ambitious commitment a company can make to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. So without further ado, I would like to invite the Group CEO of FGV Holdings Berhad, Mr. Muhammad Nazrul Izam Mansor, on stage to deliver his presentation titled Courage for Change, SBTi as the Needed Climate Action Standards. Please give me a round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I do feel much younger today, being here. Yang Berhormat, Datuk Seri Mustafa Muhammad, Economic Minister in Prime Minister's Department, Mr. Farouz Nada, Executive Director, UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, esteemed members of the panel, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon. It is indeed an honor for me representing FGV Holdings Berhad to be here this afternoon. First and foremost, I would like to thank UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei for inviting FGV to this year's much anticipated Science-Based Target Initiative Symposium. FGV is here today, not just because we are committed to the United Nations-backed business ambition for the 1.5 degrees Celsius pledge. We are here today because we have seen the impact of climate change on our lives and on our businesses. From extreme heat and devastating floods, they are no longer stories from foreign lands and scenes depicted in movies. These are extreme weather changes that have affected us and will continue to affect us in the future. The question is, what can we do about it? Do we stay idle and hope for the best? Or do we do something about it? FGV believes in collective efforts to mitigate and adopt the impacts of climate change. We have to transform the way our businesses are run. And it is important that we come together and work towards this common goal. The 12th Malaysia Plan has unveiled the government's commitment to becoming a carbon neutral country, a timely goal that will accelerate the growth of the green economy in Malaysia. FGV supports the Renewable Energy Roadmap by the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. We believe the renewed commitment to renewable energy is imperative to increase the share of renewable energy in the national energy mix. Another way forward is the Malaysia Plastic Sustainability Roadmap 2021 to 2030, which was recently announced by the Ministry of Environment and Water. This is also a critical policy response to address plastic waste pollution. I am convinced that the emerging circularity paradigm will transform the relationships between environmental protection and economic systems. With the framework in place and with strong participation from the industry to realize the framework, Malaysia is on track to transition to an economic system characterized by circularity. In line with the roadmap, FGV recently initiated its circularity initiative, which started with waste mapping and circularity gaps to understand the corporation's waste generation and strategies to transition to a circular economy. The development of both voluntary carbon markets, VCM, and domestic emissions trading scheme, ETS, are also vital to drive GHG emissions reduction in the private sectors. As one of the selected companies sitting in industry working group for VCM, FGV is committed to facilitate and contribute to the development of our first carbon trading platform. FGV believes with Bursa's expertise and support from the industry, the country should soon see the implementation of Malaysia's first platform for carbon trading through VCM and ETS. Moreover, the upcoming net zero carbon framework and introduction of economic instruments such as carbon pricing by the government will admittedly enhance the national climate agenda. The heightened commitment to climate action by the government will certainly make climate action a mainstream national sustainability and economic agenda, and the private sector will certainly have to pick up the momentum to realize a net zero economy. Ladies and gentlemen, when the first series of the IPCC's sixth assessment report was published in August 2021, it came to us as a grim reminder that climate change is an existential threat and the greatest challenge facing us and generations to come. With the third and last series of the sixth assessment report released yesterday, it is clear that we are living in a climate crisis. And all of us, particularly businesses, must mitigate and adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change. It should be clear to us that climate change is not a trend or opportunity for corporate building. The idea of climate change must not be reduced to a set of standards and certifications for managing reputation, quality, and supply chain risk. In 2020, we heard the first announcement of net zero commitment in Malaysia. By 2021, climate change, climate action, carbon neutral, and net zero have become common corporate buzzwords in a global market, including Malaysia. Business certainly brings fast financial, technological, organizational, and human resources to bear, and it constitutes a powerful political force that can exercise considerable influence over public opinion and policymakers. However, commitment to climate action without effective and meaningful targets and metrics that based on the latest climate science would slow our progress towards meeting global climate goals. We are already seeing strong criticism by climate activists who dismisses the promises and commitment to address the climate emergency. As formally put by Greta Thunberg, many words on the commitment to climate change, to climate action are just blah, blah, blah. As the global emissions keep increasing despite the decades of international talks, it should be our foremost priority to commit to meaningful actions in the fight against climate change. In meeting the global climate goals to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, it's actions, not mere words, that matter. I believe businesses are the stewards of the world, and we have a key role to promote the climate agenda in delivering a greener future and unlocking new opportunities for the next generation. Ladies and gentlemen, today, FGV is a conglomerate with a strong workforce of over 45,000 people, which is evidence of how our business contributes significantly to economic development, social equities, and national growth. In addition, oil palm is the most sustainable vegetable oil in terms of land use, and its usage has become predominant in the global food chain and food system, making our business continuity integral in sustaining global food security. As climate change possesses a risk that could disrupt our business continuity, it is only fitting for FGV to be in the front line in the fight against climate change. In designing our transformative and strategic climate action plan, we realize that climate change is a significant challenge, and it's a scientific one. And as climate science is evolving, the best climate action strategy could be based on the latest climate science. Science-based targets approach provides a defined carbon management framework to reduce carbon emissions in line with the latest climate science to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. At company level, SBTi provides guidelines and criteria for science-based target settings with adequate due diligence to ensure companies' transparency and integrity of its carbon reduction strategy. In 2021, FGV has renewed its commitment to climate action through an establishment of its transformative climate action plan, which incorporated a commitment to science-based targets through SBTi as a compass to set the company's targets and metrics for carbon emissions reduction. The commitment to science-based targets require FGV to halve its greenhouse gas emission by 2030 and hit net zero emissions to no later than 2050. FGV will also set up short and medium-term targets to ensure effective emission trackings and consistent annual reduction. In 2022, we aim to establish our carbon reduction target setting for validation by the SBTi. As a company committed to science-based targets through SBTi, our centralized GHG inventory is being developed based on the GHG Protocol Corporate Accounting and Reporting Standard. We are also committed to revising our GHG inventory and target setting if required by the upcoming SBTi Forest, Land and Agriculture, or SBTi Flag sector guidance, and the GHG Protocol Land Sector and Removals guidance. Our climate action plan also sets our comprehensive response as a company to the climate crisis. The plan comprises 6 focus areas: climate governance, carbon management, waste management, water management, operational efficiency, and climate awareness, which outlines our mitigation and adaptation efforts in support of the global climate goals. The group-wide plan is also an expression of our commitment to adopting a holistic sustainability approach in our effort to become a zero environmental impact business. At FGV, the commitment to climate action is shared by multiple layers of management, from board to the working level. The board of directors is positioned to set the company to prioritize climate action as well as other aspects of sustainability. The progress and the performance of the sustainability agenda are overseen directly by the board sustainability committee. In ensuring effective execution of climate action programs, FGV has also established a climate action unit under its group sustainability division as a dedicated management role at the working level. Ladies and gentlemen, for years we have been enlightened on the climate crisis through strong scientific narratives and concerted efforts in the international community, global climate movements, government, NGOs, and corporate leadership. 2022 must be the year of climate action, and businesses must come together to adopt an effective carbon management framework through a science-based targets approach. To date, we now have 11 companies in Malaysia, including FGV and our listed sugar subsidiary, MSM Malaysia Holdings Berhad, that are committed to science-based targets through SBTi, as keeping the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius is only possible through collective actions. The private sector must be guided by the latest climate science and come together to realize the global climate goals in limiting the global temperature rise. Jumping on the climate bandwagon won't cool the world down. Businesses can't commit to net zero or announce their commitment to climate action if their strategies are not backed by the latest climate science. We need meaningful and consistent efforts to reduce carbon, and the science-based targets approach is our best tool to limiting the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. For the sake of our survival and our next generation, our commitment to climate action can't be a charade. We should leave this symposium with the obligation to walk the talk. Let us not leave thinking that this is someone else's problem. On that note, I would like to thank UN Global Network, Compact Network Malaysia, and Brunei once again for inviting me to speak at this symposium today. I look forward to the discussions coming up today to derive solutions that could be implemented together in achieving net zero economy and limiting the global temperature rise at 1.5 degrees Celsius, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nazrul, for your inspiring presentation. And we would like to congratulate FGV on its commitment to become a net zero emissions business by 2050 through the science-based targets pathway. So, ladies and gentlemen, SBTi, which was founded in 2015, has witnessed significant growth in recent years and has now become the fastest growing and most reputable climate mitigation initiative in the corporate sector. Today, the initiative has mobilized more than 2,500 companies in 60 countries to commit to decarbonizing with climate science in a robust and credible way. So the SBTs are still not as popular among Malaysian companies. Perhaps it's due to low awareness and know-how. And as what Mr. Nazrul has shown on his slide just now, currently we have a total of 11 companies which has committed to the science-based targets. And today we are extremely excited to be welcoming the 12th company to commit to this gold standard. The company which will be making its pledge today is Malaysian Resources Corporation Berhad, MRCB. So let us now witness this signing session together. I would like to invite Mr. Abhijit China Chief Corporate Officer of MRCB on stage for his signing session, followed by Mr. Faraz Nazar, Executive Director of Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, as a witness to this commitment, please. Thank you, Mr. Amagit and Mr. Faraz. We now return to us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is indeed a significant moment, and we applaud MRCB for heightening your climate ambition. And we definitely hope to see more and more companies like yourselves here today to join in the chorus to commit to the science-based targets. So now we shall take a short 5 minutes break, and we will continue at 3 p.m. No, actually 10 minutes break. 3 p.m. to hear about the updates of SBTi from our international speaker. So see you at 3 p.m. sharp. Hi everyone, we are going to start in a few more minutes. Yeah, nanti I'm gonna start. Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's move on to the next part of our SBTi Symposium. In the next few hours, you will be learning about the most recent SBTi updates, hearing from experienced sustainability practitioners and leaders on their motivation to embark on their SBTi journey, as well as other global complementary initiatives which your organization can participate in to collectively achieve a net zero future. So ladies and gentlemen, more and more companies are adopting net zero targets. However, not all net zero standards are created equal. Without following a common definition, net zero targets can be inconsistent and their collective impact is strongly limited. Through a transparent multi-stakeholder process, the SBTi has recently developed the first global science-based standard for companies to set net zero targets. And today, we have Ms. Zeniko Zaflo, who will be sharing more about these updates with us. Zeniko is currently the engagement manager for science-based targets at WWF South Africa. She contributes to various corporate engagement activities, including the development of a supplier engagement toolkit, and is co-leading work on country activation and incubator activities in Africa as well as Southeast Asia. So ladies and gentlemen, before I pass the stage to Zeniko, I would like to inform you that there will be a 10 to 15 minutes Q&A session after her presentation. So for those of you who are physically present today, I encourage you to raise your hand and we'll pass you the mic for you to raise your questions to Zeniko. And for those of you who are online, we encourage you to type in your questions into the Q&A chat box and we'll address them right after Zeniko's speech. Without further ado, I will pass the stage to Zeniko. Please give me in welcoming her for So anyway, hi Zeniko.
Thanks, great. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. Let me just quickly present my screen. There we go. And hopefully you're able to see my presentation as well. Good morning and good afternoon to colleagues. It's a morning here in Johannesburg, a very chilly morning. In South Africa, quite foggy as well. We are well into autumn. As just mentioned, my name is Zeniko Njapo, and I'll be presenting today on the Science-Based Targets Initiative and some of the work that we've been doing, as well as some of the key resources and materials that would be grateful for colleagues that are joining the symposium to have a look at. In terms of a brief agenda, I'll be talking through really 5 bullet points. So a brief introduction to the SBTi, how companies as well as SMEs can go about joining the SBTi. And then thirdly, I'll quickly go through the updated target validation booking system, which we introduced at the end of last year, as well as an update on some of our recent news and events coming up, and as I mentioned, highlighting some of our key resources and materials that share bulk of the information that we have. Great. So in terms of a brief introduction, so yeah, the SBTi is really a global body, and I think just provided quite a good introduction there. But we really are an organization made up of 4 founding partners, which are the CDP, the UNGC, the WRI, and also the WWF. I'm currently hosted by the WWF office here in South Africa, and it's also in collaboration with We Mean Business. So in terms of really what we do, I mean, the intention or the aim of the SBTi is to really drive ambitious climate action in the private sector by trying to enable companies to set their emissions reductions targets, which are based on science and really are consistent with the Paris Agreement. So what we try and do is we aim to remove some of the technical barriers for the adoption of SBTs, by trying to translate some of the technical climate science jargon and emission scenarios into palatable information that can be accessed by companies and organizations. And we do that in the form of really creating guidance materials, target setting methods, the interactive tools that we have, and other resources that we have. And then, yeah, I mean, briefly, we've been working to drive the uptake of science-based targets, and really our key focus over the next few years is a lot of the emerging market economies, and hence some of the work that I'm doing, as well as part of the country activation project here in South Africa, and also supporting with some activities in Southeast Asia. And then maybe to have a brief recap of what exactly science-based targets are. So SBTs are really short to medium term corporate emissions reduction targets that are in line with the level of decarbonization required by the Paris Agreement, and in order for us to align or meet our global emissions so that we don't exceed 1.5 C in terms of temperature. And a key tool to prepare for and to accelerate the transition to a zero carbon economy are really what we think science-based targets are. And then, I mean, just to kind of put it in really simple terms, SBTs are really, or try and support or help companies to determine how much they need to reduce their emissions, and also how quickly they need to reduce their emissions. So as you can see on the slide, we have these three bullet points here on the side. And what we've previously had in the past is this kind of two phase that we've highlighted here, which we call near-term targets. So those range between 5 and 10 years. And then what my colleague was describing earlier on was the point or the bubble that we have there in purple, which is one that is now a net zero target. So looking ahead into 2050. And we really look at net zero targets being those long-term targets. However, we do recognize that companies need to also have in place near-term science-based targets to enable them to reach their net zero targets. And then what we also require of companies is to disclose how they're performing against their targets and just their general emissions once they've obviously set their targets. And then just to highlight some of the 4 basic or key considerations for setting near and long-term targets. And again, this is also in line with our the updates that we released in the middle of last year in 2021, where we mentioned or we highlighted that as an initiative, we will be increasing our minimum level of ambition for all our targets. So we previously started with a minimum level of ambition of 2 degrees, and then we increased that to well below 2C. And now from mid-July this year, we will only be accepting targets that are aligned with 1.5 C minimum level of ambition. And again, this is in response to some of the most recent materials, predominantly coming from the IPCC, on us trying to limit our level of or trying to meet our 1.5 C threshold going on to 2050. So these updates or 4 considerations that I speak of here are going to be implemented or be effective from mid-July, although we are already encouraging companies to be looking at these, especially when they're looking at setting targets at the moment. So in terms of what we deem to be really 4 key considerations are a boundary, ambition, time frame, and what type of method is appropriate. So you can see on this slide, we have a comparison between near-term targets and long-term targets or net zero targets. As you'll see, for scope 1 and 2, in terms of boundary, we require a 95% coverage, both near-term and long-term targets. While for scope 3 emissions, for near-term targets, the coverage is, or the recommended coverage is currently 67%. If your emissions are above 40% of your total GHG inventory. So these are now your scope 3 emissions, whereas for net zero targets, the coverage is actually 90%. So it's a much larger boundary. And then secondly, in terms of ambition, as mentioned, we've increased our minimum level of ambition for scope 1 and 2 emissions for near-term targets to align with 1.5C. For near-term targets, we're still accepting well below 2C minimum level of ambition for scope 3. However, for net zero, we require companies to align to 1.5C. Then in terms of timeframes, as mentioned earlier on, the timeframe for near-term targets between 5 and 10 years, whereas for long-term targets, it's 2050. And then on the last column, we've then described some of the methods that are accessible to companies for both near-term and long-term targets. The only method that is not applicable for net zero purposes is the supply engagement or customer engagement method. And then in terms of the progress that we've seen over, I suppose, the past 6 years or so, we have now over 2,000 companies that are taking action. And of those, just more than 1,200 have science-based targets, and also just above 1,300 have committed to setting a target that is aligned with 1.5C. And I'll speak to this later, but this also speaks to our business ambition for 1.5C campaign, which allows companies or gives the opportunity for companies to join the race to zero. And all of this information, again, is accessible on our website and also in our previous progress reports and our upcoming progress reports. And then in terms of where we've seen things, what we've seen in the Southeast Asia or Asia markets in general, as you'll see there, I've kind of highlighted where we are with Malaysia specifically, where we have almost a similar split of companies that are committed and that have targets set. But we generally have been seeing a more kind of increased uptake over the past few months in these regions. And then briefly on how companies can join the SBTi. So we really look at the call to action process or the journey to setting science-based targets as this 5-step process. The first kind of step that we encourage companies is to commit. And then from committing, companies then have 24 months to develop and submit their targets and also communicate their targets. And then, as mentioned earlier on, what we then encourage companies to do is to disclose how they are tracking against their targets on an annual basis in any kind of publicly available platform. So if the company is reporting to the CDP, that's the kind of best platform for us. But we also look at other platforms like sustainability reports or integrated reports or information available on the company's website. So those are the kind of main steps to commit. And again, during the development process, we really encourage companies to have a look at our resources, which I'll also speak to in a bit, so that you are able to access these resources and materials as you develop your targets. And then in terms of the main differences between how large corporates versus SMEs can join. So for large corporates and financial institutions, we have a commitment letter, or the standard commitment route, where you complete the form online through the SBTi application process. And then after submitting that application using the online form, you send the signed version to us via the commitment at email address, which is also available on our website. And then specifically for financial institutions, they can commit to net zero through the regular routes, but also just to highlight that at the moment, we are not validating net zero targets for financial institutions, because we are still developing the net zero standard for financial institutions, which is due to be completed by the first quarter of next year, of 2023. And then on the right-hand side, we also have a streamlined route for SMEs. So SMEs skip the kind of committing stage. They can just go on to set a target. It's a pre-populated online form where you just plug in your emissions values, and then it will give you your emissions reductions required, or your targets. You submit the form, and then a due diligence assessment is done, and that information is then uploaded onto our system, and you're reflected on the website as a company that has committed. And then, yeah, as mentioned, we have the SBTi commitment letter, and in the commitment letter, so this is now specifically for large corporates or financial institutions. If you scroll down, I think it's on the second or the third page of our commitment letter, we've got this option where it asks you whether you want to set net zero targets, including long-term targets. If you tick that option, then you will automatically be part of or join our Business Ambition for 1.5C campaign. And you will be highlighted also on the Race to Zero, which is the next slide. So the BA 1.5C campaign was really started in 2019 to increase the number of companies that are setting ambitious targets aligned with 1.5C. And we are continuing with this campaign, but now it's really through the net zero standard. And as mentioned, if you sign up for net zero commitments, then you automatically join our Business Ambition for 1.5C campaign, and also the Race to Zero as a result. I'll maybe just, in the interest of time, I'll flick through these slides in terms of the recent updates, but just to highlight to the audience that we have our new resources and booking system that's available on our website. Feel free to go there. It's more updated. You're able to save information as you're completing it. And then there's also a validation-free pricing structure that again may not be applicable for certain regions such as yours. And then, yeah, again, digging into the tied validation booking system, you are then able to reserve a date on when would you like your validation to commence. And what we then say is that the dates that you select is the last day from which your targets will be validated. So your validation could start sooner than that indicated dates, but would obviously communicate that to the company. And then the SME validation form is still being prepared. We will be communicating that information through our newsletter once the form is ready for SMEs, or the updated form for SMEs is ready. And then in terms of news and events, so we have flag and cement sector work due to be released during the course of this year. And then we also have the steel, buildings and net zero for FI's projects or sector projects happening that are due to be completed in the coming year. And then we also have our progress reports that's coming out quite soon this month, in a couple of weeks. And then we also in the process of working on the measurement reporting and verification project, or the MRV projects that's due to start issuing some of the first iterations of the actual framework later on this year. And then I also won't delve in detail on this slide, but we released a new policy for fossil fuel companies that may be important, where we will no longer be accepting commitments from companies that are involved in any exploration, extraction, and or mining production of any fossil fuel assets or products. So that includes oil, natural gas, coal, and other fossil fuels. But again, there's more information on our website on this policy. Then in terms of upcoming events, I would highly encourage the audience to sign up to these. So we've got 2 sessions coming up on net zero. The first one is later this week on Thursday. We've got 2 sessions, which is a deep dive into setting corporate and science-based net zero targets. And they will also be answering some of the frequently asked questions that we've been getting, and looking at the implementation approach of net zero targets. And then in the coming week, we have the Net Zero Finance webinar, where they'll be launching the standard development process. Again, highly encourage for participants to register for these 2 sessions coming up. And then lastly, in terms of some of our key resources that would highly recommend for colleagues to have a look at. So we have the how-to guide, which is really a simple step-by-step flowchart that supports you in the process of how to set science-based targets, what method to use, whether or not you're an SME, etc. So it's a really great flowchart to have a look at. And then encourage participants to also have a look at the corporate manual, the criteria and the validation protocol. These are the main key resources that companies use in the process of setting their targets. And then from a net zero perspective, we also have a getting started guide, which is again quite useful, details out some of the sector work and applicability. And then we have the detailed standard, providing some of the detailed guidance. We've got the criteria and also the tool to accompany that. And then also again on our website, we have available a various number of resources for specific sectors. And notably here, we have highlighted some of the apparel, the aviation, FI, sector guidances, ICT, and also electric utilities. And then just maybe again focusing on FIs. So these are really the steps that we encourage financial institutions take when setting targets on their financing activities. And really the FI framework has these 4 key elements, which are the criteria that really present some of the qualitative and quantitative rules for FIs, and then we have the guidance, really sharing some of the basics, some of the background thinking to targets for the specific sector. And then we also have tools, which are, we also have the methods, I skipped that part, that are detailed again on our website and other previous webinars that we've had, as well as tools that are Excel-based and some are Python-based. And then second to last, or actually last, We have, again, really a suite of resources available on our website. So if you just go to our resources page, we have a breakdown there, and we even allow companies to kind of toggle depending on where in the SBTi target setting journey they're at. So if it's the development stage, you can only kind of view those development resources to see what's important for you. We also have a lot of frequently asked questions available, and also other online webinars. And yeah, apologies for running a bit over, but happy to take any questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Zaniko, for this very informative session. I'm sure that the audience has learned a lot from you and would have many burning questions for you. So with that, I would like to first open the questions to the physical audience today. If you have any question, please raise your hands and we'll pass the mic to you.
Hi, Zanita. Dr. Dennis Ganendra, thank you for a very nice introduction there. Where do you see offsets playing a role in targets? And when are offsets acceptable and not acceptable?
Sure. Would you like me to answer the questions as they come, or are we going to take a couple first?
You can answer the questions as they come.
Okay. Okay, great. So with regards to offsets, we don't really, as an initiative, deem offsets to be credible towards achieving your targets. So that's specifically for net zero targets. However, for the net zero standard, I think there are more graphs. Sorry, I just don't have the graph in this slide specifically. But what we say is that towards the end, where you have try to reduce your direct emissions as much as possible, then companies can start looking at offsets, but those would not really contribute to achieving your near-term targets. Hopefully I've answered your question, Dr. Dennis.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the hall have any questions? Okay.
I'm too curious, Sunita. Next question is, do you have any data about how companies are mandating climate pledges in their supply chain procurement? So when does climate pledges turn from being nice to have to a must-have?
Yeah, thanks so much. That's a great question. So yeah, I mean, the supply engagement space or the supply chain space is also a relatively new area for us, that we are developing more resources and materials on it. But we do have a couple of case studies already on our website. I mean, we've seen quite interesting cases coming from specifically the retail space, where we're seeing collaborative efforts between, the retailer and their supply chains, and where, they're even like training their suppliers on setting science-based targets, or even like developing some of the tools and resources, understanding that in many instances, suppliers are smaller SMEs that don't have the resources or capacity to focus on their emissions reductions. So that's what we've started seeing. From a validation perspective, I mean, we do require companies, or we do ask questions of companies that want to set a supply engagement target on what are the key initiatives that they have in plan towards achieving their supply engagement targets. So so it's definitely questions that we ask, but obviously, the responsibility does lie on the company. And with our upcoming MRV standard, we also just want to increase that transparency to say, to share with the public on this is what the company is committed to, this is what they're tracking, so that other public stakeholders can work to holding those companies accountable for their actions.
Thank you, Zaniko, and thank you, Dr. Dennis. So now we'll take a few more questions from the online audience. So if the tech team can share the screen. I can't see. Okay, so one of the question is, what are the strategies recommended for industries that have commitments to achieve net zero? Would you like to take that, Zaniko?
Yeah, sure, definitely. So this one, maybe I will defer it to, sorry, I've just lost my screen there. Oh, there we go. I'll maybe defer this one to the net zero webinar that's coming up later this week, where we will be doing more of a deep dive into some of the commitments for net zero targets. But really what we've seen coming through of companies are very innovative, out-of-the-box thinking strategies in align or in efforts to align with 1.5C long-term targets.
Right, thank you. The other one is, can you elaborate what is meant by absolute contraction? I believe that is absolute contraction.
Yes, yeah. So in our types of methods that we have, as I mentioned in our presentation, we have the absolute contraction, and also we have the physical intensity or convergence. So with contraction, the idea is that companies will be reducing their emissions at a same rate of reduction. So it's really mostly applicable for specific sectors where we recommend, for example, the methodology will say you're reducing your emissions at maybe 20% as an example on an annual basis, and all the companies for all companies within that sector will be required to reduce their emissions by that same absolute contraction rate. Whereas with the convergence or physical intensity convergence approach, that method requires companies to achieve a same point of emissions in future at a given point in time. So it really works to converge to meeting emissions at a certain point.
All right, thanks, Zaniko. The other question is, what happens if a corporation sets a goal that is approved but not met on time?
Yes, so it's actually something that's a good question, and it's something that we have now starting to develop more work on, specifically the MRV project. So I mean, the SBTi has kind of been around since towards the end of 2015, just before Paris happened, and so we've started seeing companies really sharing more information on their near-term targets, because those were at a minimum 5-year targets. At the moment, we don't really have any, I would say, consequences of companies not meeting their targets. But what we are doing as part of the MRV project is trying to highlight some of those, some of that information more transparently for stakeholders to see, and then obviously for companies to or other stakeholders to hold that company accountable. And also just to emphasize that as part of the MRV project, we'll also be updating our call to action table to highlight some of the companies that perhaps are not performing well or are overachieving their targets. So similar to how we've been doing it in our progress reports. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Zaniko. And we have the second last question. So that is, must the holding company submit the SBTi for and on behalf of their subsidiaries in the group, or is it expected of each subsidiary to submit them individually?
So we generally recommend that a target is set at a group level. Obviously, if the group is able to set a target, so for example, fossil fuels would not be. However, if then the subsidiary also wants to set a target, they are more than welcome to do so. But the emphasis is that at a group level, the company should have accounted for all its subsidiaries as per the 95% coverage for scope 1 and 2 emissions.
Okay, thanks, Nico. I see one more question. If you can flash to the next slide, my team. So how do you translate the percentage reduction needed to comply with the 1.5C? And what is the reason for fossil fuel companies not included in SBTi?
Sorry, how do you translate the percent reduction needed to comply with? Okay. Yes. So this, so all of this is kind of the background workings to our methods and the tool. So basically, I mean, it goes back to how our methods are developed, which might be a bit of length to discuss in this session. But we basically start with the global carbon budgets. Or emissions budgets, then we drill it down to scenarios available for specific sectors, and then we drill it down to actually specific sector needs, and making sure that all of these layers from the budgets to the scenarios and to the sector-specific pathways, they're in alignment with 1.5C. And in doing this work, we obviously rely on a lot of information, particularly from the International Energy Agency, which has a lot of the energy-related scenarios that feed into the work that we do, and obviously taking into account some of the economic activities for specific sectors, and then that derives us or gets us to that specific percentage reduction to comply with 1.5C.
Okay, thank you so much, Zenico. So we have run out of time. Once again, thank you so much, Zenico, for spending your time with us today. And well, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for not taking all of the questions because we are out of time. So if you have any questions to ask Zenico, you may actually contact us at info@ungcmalaysia.org, and we will address them after this event. So thank you, Zenico, again. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, now that we have learned about the most recent updates of the SBTi, you may perceive it as one of the most rigorous standards to uphold. And you may be wondering, why should my company set a science-based target? And can my company really achieve those targets? So for this next session, we are honored to have a few sustainability experts and leaders to share with us on why their organization decided to adopt the SBTs and the challenges and opportunities that they have faced along the way, and can Malaysian companies really achieve it. So the panelists for this session are Mr. Muhammad Irwan, Head of Sustainability of Sarawak Energy, Datuk Dr. Dennis, CEO of Min Consult Sendirian Berhad, Mr. Tang Chi-on, Group CEO of Diatronic Energy, and Ms. Adeline, Head of Sustainability of Axiata Group. So joining us for this panel this afternoon is Dr. Farah, Senior Lecturer at the Faculty of Business and Law at Taylor's University, Malaysia. May I now invite all of the panelists and moderators to come on stage. So please give them a big round of applause. Okay, and I shall now pass the stage to you, Dr. Farah. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So may we have a seat, please? So welcome to the panel session in this afternoon. And let me first introduce our panel speakers here. First, we have Mr. Muhammad Irwan, Mr. Muhammad Irwan Aman. So Mr. Muhammad Irwan is the Head of Sustainability at Sarawak Energy Berhad. As a pioneer for sustainability at Sarawak Energy, he established a sustainability reporting mechanism and governing structure in embedding sustainability practices into Sarawak Energy's business processes. He also serves as a board member to UNGC Malaysia and Brunei Network, representing Sarawak Energy. He has over 24 years of work experience in power utility and clean energy financing sector. Prior to joining Sarawak Energy, Mr. Irwan was a consultant and country representative for Mitsubishi UFJ Morgan Stanley Securities and a technical expert for environmental energy for Tenaga Nasional Berhad. In addition to his working experience, he has been engaged as a technical advisor for various international and national clean energy projects. Next, we have Dato Dr. Dennis Ganendra. So Dato Dennis Ganendra is the CEO of Min Consult. In his engineering career spanning over 30 years, he has managed gifted professionals in local and international projects. Min Consult has advised conservative Malaysian government and numerous governments internationally. It has developed as major international engineering force with projects from international funding agencies such as Asian Development Bank, World Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and Japan International Cooperation Agency, multinational corporations and foreign governments covering over 26 countries in 5 continents. Dato Dennis is a pioneering and developer of the renewable energy projects and is the founder of the Timeless Green Group of Companies, a multiple resource group with solar, biogas, and hydro concessions across the ASEAN region. And next we have Mr. Tam Ji-on here. Mr. Tam Ji-on is the founder and CEO of Ditrolic Energy Group, a regional clean energy company with over 12 years of experience in the field of solar and renewable energy in Malaysia and beyond. As one of the early starters of the industry, he has broad experience in business development, project execution, corporate and project structuring, as well as wide exposure in renewable energy finance and contracts. In his capacity as the group CEO, he provides strategic direction to the company and manages operations in the key strategic area of the group businesses. To date, Mr. Tam Ji-on has successfully developed and owned more than 350 megawatts of projects in various countries, such as Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. He also sits on the board of a Chinese and European Fortune 500 independent power producer subsidiary. And last but not least, we have Ms. Adeline Anthony here. Ms. Adeline Anthony is the head of sustainability of Axiata Group. She has over 20 years of experience in operations, consulting, and corporate planning roles. Her area of expertise focuses on environmental management and sustainability. Prior to joining Axiata as the head of sustainability, she was the global sustainability lead for Kellogg's, where she developed programs to strategically reduce energy, water, and waste. Throughout her career, she has established GH emission inventories, developed sustainability strategy and frameworks, supported ESG reporting, and assured non-financials for clients across the region. So these are our 4 panel speakers here on stage with me. And first of all, we will start with the questions. So my first question will be addressing to each one of the speakers here. So we will start on my right-hand side, please, with Mr. Mohammed first. So the question is, what was your organization's motivation to adopt the science-based target initiatives?
Yeah, thank you so much, Doctor. I think the motivation is basically climate change is a real thing. It's happening. We have seen the data because being an engineering companies, we records, for example, our hydro. We have the records for long-term historical record. We have seen that happening. So then it will impact our operation. It's real. It's impact our hydropower projects, it impact our thermal plant, it's impact the way we transmit our energy at distribution level and transmission level. And all this also impact our adaptation, how we respond to it. So I think that's why SBTi is basically one of the tools, how we're going to achieve, especially the targets and metrics, how we design, how we reduce the emissions from at a group level, at a corporate level. And then that's why it's important to us We need to understand this because power utilities, basically all our power plant, thermal power plant will be in operation at least for 30 years. Our hydro power plant to be operated at least for 100 over years. So that's why it's very important for us to understand it. What's the cost for us to adapt to climate change? And SBTi is one of the tools. That's why we embarked into SBTi earlier, because this is where we are and how we're going to reduce it and what sort of intervention that we need to do in our planning. I think that's all for me. Thank you. As a start.
Thank you, Mr. Irwan. So may we have Miss Adeline to share?
All right. I think interestingly, it started, the conversation always started with, the runway is short. And that ties back a lot to, what we hear today as well, the latest IPCC report, it's saying we have to do something now. And, but, as the conversation went on, so Axiata Group is actually a telco company. We also have a digital arm. This aspiration actually just became the foundation of everything that we were doing. For example, like the study that was done by GSMA and Carbon Trust in 2018, what they found is that, for telco companies specifically, in terms of the total amount of greenhouse gases that we emit is only about 0.4%, but the impending effect that we can do, by working with others is, we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 10 times more than our total emissions. So, some simple examples in terms of, what we do at Axiata, our subsidiary in Bangladesh, for example, we work with the farmers through setting up monitoring systems to help them with their farming to make it more efficient. Similarly for telco companies, by setting up the platform, currently now you're talking about 5G, you're talking about cloud. By putting in place those infrastructure, you also improve telecommunications, which indirectly reduces greenhouse gas emissions, healthcare. So, as we progress, this became, this was really part of what we do. So I think that's how we started on this journey. But most importantly, also, it sets the foundation for some of the direction that we're looking at in terms of managing climate risk. So when, TCFD is also something that we will be embarking on. And a lot of these would need to tie back to a particular standard. And when you start adopting a standard, that's when you start looking at data, you start looking at numbers and start identifying really where are the gaps in terms of the improvement areas that we need to look at.
Thank you so much, Ms. Adeline, for sharing your insights. May we have, next. Mr. Tam, please share your insights on the initiatives, the motivation,
All right, thank you very much. Our company, Diatronic, is actually, we introduce ourselves as an energy transition company. So we provide services to businesses to help them to transition and to decarbonize their energy supply. So our company is actually not a big emitter ourselves. We don't use a lot of electricity. We don't produce a lot of carbon, but we are more like a service provider to businesses, right, to help them to decarbonize. So what is our motivation to subscribe to SBTi? So basically, we serve a lot of clients across very diverse industries, manufacturing, transportation, data centers, educational institute. So these are our customers, and we work a lot with large corporations across the region. So MNC, multinationals, Fortune 500 companies. So throughout our businesses, we see a lot of clients, especially from Europe, which is, arguably they are one of the more environmental conscious group. They have set for themselves very ambitious target, which throughout our working with them, we feel that somewhat inspired, by their commitment, and some of them have very ambitious commitment, and they are going to achieve a net zero by 2025. One of my clients wants to achieve net zero by 2025, and they are one of the largest food manufacturer in the world. So this is something that, you know, as a company providing services to our client, we feel that we ourselves need to take action, and we need to prove that achieving net zero is possible, so that we are answerable to our stakeholder, such as our client themselves, our banking partners, you know, our supply chain partners. So, which many of them, they are also SBTi company themselves. So I think that's the motivation. And also throughout my career developing solar plant, power plant in the region, also I work with several companies, state-owned power generator. We can see some of them taking drastic action. They sell off their nuclear plant, you know, resulting in losses for the group. And also they cancel their coal-fired plant, which is going to build in the next 6 months' time, because the government asked them to do so, and convert them into solar plant, just in a matter of 6 months. So those so-called drastic action, you know, really make us wonder, you know, if this company can really take this kind of action. So why not, you know, we as a company play a part? Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tam. That's very inspirational. Let's have Dr. Dennis.
Thank you, Doc. We have three motivations. Firstly, I want to echo what Irwan said. We must act now. 1.5 degrees is the time for catastrophic and irreversible change. And current scenarios show that we'll mostly hit that in 2030s. We in Malaysia are not protected from all this. Our analysis shows that rainfall in 2020 was 6% higher than what it was in the preceding 3 years. Our studies also show that we have a lot of low-lying coastal areas that will be inundated in the coming years. It's not too late, but we need to take action now. Secondly, these corporate pledges are not going to be a nice to have, but they're going to transform to be a must have. A recent global survey showed that 83% of participants said that in their products and services, they wanted to have environmental considerations taken in. About 3,000 companies have now signed up and have a climate change pledge. And they are now looking at scope 3, which is looking at supply chains. So very soon, they'll be coming to all of us and asking, where do we stand on this very important issue? In the finance sector, banks and financial institutions are applying ESG principles more and more in their businesses, and it's expected 50 trillion in ESG assets going to be coming in by 2025, which is about 1/3 of global managed assets. So in our business itself, clients, international clients are already asking us, what are we doing in terms of ESG compliance? At the moment, it's a nice to have, but it will transform into a must do. So at MinConsult, we've always really led transformation. So we are the first ASEAN firm to go global in the 1970s. We are the first ASEAN firm to sign up with Transparency International in 2008. And I'm very happy to tell you that we are also the first ASEAN engineering and engineering consultancy firm that's gone into making this pledge. And lastly, we believe in good business doing good. Okay, the studies have shown that for Malaysia, the pathway to net zero is a potential 50 billion ringgit to our GDP and potentially 200 to 300,000 jobs. That is a massive opportunity for us. We ourselves as investors have invested in solar as early as 2012. We're also doing biogas. We're also doing hydro. And a lot of these projects not just produce renewable energy, but also clean up the environment. But when we do these great environmental projects, we also make good profits. So we believe in that as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dennis, for sharing your insights. So I see the common theme across the 4 panel speakers is that we must do something now and we must act now. So let me move on to our next question. So I heard that Sarawak Energy is the most experienced in adopting the science-based target initiative. So my next question will be directed to Year One. Could you please share with us the science-based target initiative that your organizations have adopted and how long has it been implemented?
Yeah, okay. In the preparation for SBTi, of course, in 2014, we don't think about SBTi at that point of time because it's been introduced in 2015. We understand climate change is one of the important issues for Sarawak Energy, and then our journey toward increasing our renewable energy generation mix, basically that's what it. So we need to track it down. So how? So starting 2014, we measure our grid emission intensity and get the figures assured by third party, by PwC, because we want to understand that that figures in terms of uncertainties of the data, in terms of the completeness, accurateness of the data is there. So we're able to communicate to them. It will be one of the key indicators for us to communicate with the management. All right, and then we see there is then the business, we're able to build a business case. Why is it this is important to us, right? We are going to become regional powerhouse in supplying renewable energy. Our management should always mention that we need to achieve international best practices in whatever we do. Either hydropower development, we need to achieve at international sustainable best practices. We adopt International Hydropower Association standards. All this, when we go deeper into the documents, yes, we need to develop, we need to projects and really assess how climate change impact our projects, be it at corporate level, be it at project level. We have to do it. So that's why then one question comes to our mind. Data is a critical component in our journey. All right, a journey to become either SBTi or either for continuous improvement is a key fundamental to us. So starting from 2014, we keep on increasing the index that we assured. Okay, although sometimes there are a lot of issues in our data. For example, the accurateness, and then whether it's being captured properly, the governance part of the data. So all this one of the biggest challenges for us, from 2014 up to 2017, I think so. And then now is because the operation understand what is it for, because we publish their data in our sustainability reports. They understand how their data been shared with other stakeholders. So we face less self-resistance, either for the data itself or during assurance process. So I think moving forward, especially with SBTi, each of these emission reduction roadmaps, we call it roadmap, either it's for transmission, either it's for generation, or either it's for our supply chain, we need to communicate with them to get the buy-in. What can we do in order to really achieve this? So I think being the first one is quite challenging because we don't have any reference at the point of time. But believe me, learning by doing is the most rewarding, initiative, because you really feel that with the team that we have, with partners, for example, GCMY and PwC, for example, Adeline was with PwC before. So with pool of mind, we're able to say, yes, we can do it. Now, honestly, for SBTi, we are doing on ourselves. TCFD, we are doing on ourselves, but verification, we appoint third party. So it's kind of all this exercise to me personally and my team here, they're quite rewarding in the sense of the ownerships of it. I think that's part of the challenge, Doctor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yerwan. So I think you have also shared a bit of the challenges. Actually, my next question was going to ask about the challenges. Maybe we can move on to Ms. Adeline to answer this question. So adopting the SBTi provides a clearly defined pathway to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. What were your challenges faced when adopting the SBTi initially, and how did you overcome them?
All right. Just coming back to what Irwan said, they started the journey in 2014. Even here at Axiata, it wasn't just an overnight decision, that you decide, I want to sign up with the SBTi. I think the journey started 2 years ago when we had this campaign called, Advancing Zero, where the focus was really on getting people internally to appreciate and understand that everyone has a part to do to make a difference in this world. So, it started at that, it begins with me, it begins with us. And then from there, it grew. So, of course, data collection, data crunching, I think that's a challenge that we all have. Maybe I'll just take one step forward and say, if you want to sign up to SBTi, to a certain extent, you have to make sure that you have your data sets. You understand your data, you understand where's the emissions coming from. So that is definitely a challenge. Having the data is one. Getting everyone to understand what this data means, that is another challenge. But I think once you have the foundation, where people are aware that they need to do something, the openness to start to understand data and to have conversations around, what this data means, what do we need to do with it, it's a lot easier. Of course, that also needs to be supported by, the tone from the top, support that we need from management. With all the recent movements, investors ask the new MCCG, I think in most organizations, I would dare say there is a lot of buy-in already to a certain level, at the management level, at the board level. But again, one of the challenges within this realm is also the ever-changing requirements, new standards, new requirements. I think that can also get a bit difficult, to get a grasp of it. But I think if you understand the heart of the matter, it's really about reporting what matters where it matters most. That is really looking at your materiality. So if you have that, if you got that right, any standards, it won't matter because you are really addressing what is key to your organization and what is key to, what external parties are looking at as well. But I think above all, one of the benefits of, signing up to SBTi or having adopt SBTi as a standard, it's a lot of the conversations or the traction that you get, around net zero, 1.5 degrees, everyone is talking about it. And that also means that everyone is looking and moving in the same direction. So one of the other big challenge is also technology. You don't know what you don't know. Based on what I read is that whatever technology that's here today, it's good enough to help us to only meet our 2030 target, which is half of where we need to go. The rest of it, no one knows. But the fact that if the vision, the ambition is the same, and everyone is looking in the same direction, you would find not just the big corporates wanting to play a role, you get the SMEs, you get our entrepreneur groups also moving in that same direction. So I think a lot of the challenges that we think we see are really something that is more of an opportunity. But definitely one of the most difficult conversations that we have internally is funding. None of these projects are going to be cheap. And, how do we fund this? So I think that comes back down to your financial framework. I might not have the answer today, but at least through signing up to the SBTi, we are able to have these open conversations in the organization to look, what can we do in the next 1 year, the next 2 years. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ms. Adeline. Is there anything that Ms. Irwan would like to add on about the challenges and how you overcame them?
Yeah, very true what Adeline mentioned about the technology part of it. But I think she also mentioned about materiality. So important for companies or corporate to really list down, do a priority in what they are going to do. Again, based on the real feedbacks on the operation, what sort of data they're having throughout the value chain, and focus to the key one, the material one. Only then you can see how, in terms of approach, what sort of technology that you're going to embark in, and then you can prioritize from there. So it's important to have this overview of your value chain and how much in terms of CO2 or emission going to be reduced, so that whatever investment focus on things that technologies that having a higher impact. Right. So this is important. I think the points I would like to add on top of what Adeline mentioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Irwan. So we have two more questions here for my left-hand side of the speakers. So first to Tato Dennis. In your opinion, how does incorporating the science-based target initiatives within your sustainability framework make an impact on accelerating your organization's sustainability agenda in achieving net zero?
It's a very important part of it. I think greenwashing is a very serious issue in this topic. So for our organization, we produce about 700 tons of CO2 a year. So what we could do very easily is to just buy offsets, and offsets cost us about 5 ringgit per ton. So I could go around and say, no, we are now net zero now, and all I had to do is spend about 3,500 US. Nothing. Is that correct? Is that the right thing to do? Are you helping in any way? Those projects were going to be there anyway. You didn't make those projects happen. They happened to be there anyway. Yes, they happen to be producing certs. So I actually think that sort of behavior is frankly unethical, you know? So that's why you don't have to just talk about doing good. You must do good in a good, proper way. And that's why SBTi for us is really the gold standard, so that we make sure that what we do is done properly. Of course, it's much more expensive, you know, just to meet 50% of our reduction is going to cost us a 7-figure number. But it's a investment we're happy to do. And of course, that investment comes with a return. It's not an investment which is lost. It's an investment with a return as well. But you go through a process where you really contribute. SBTi also has been very instrumental in updating our MIST. So MIST is the Min Consult Sustainability Toolbox. So it's something we developed about 2 years ago, and we offer as a service free to our clients, where we map out all the UN SGD requirements for our sector into 8 principles. And what we do is we quantify it and all the environmental benefits for our clients for all their projects using this toolbox. And we did something, but I think SBTi has been very useful in helping us to update our toolbox so it becomes relevant. Because as you're saying, you know, the rules are changing all the time. So you've got to keep up to date with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dennis. So my next question before I open the floor to Q&A. So that will be directed to Mr. Tam. What would your advice to be for other organizations who are planning to embark on their journey to adopt SBTi?
Yeah. Basically, to adopt SBTi, in my opinion, it takes 3 steps. And number 1, you need to commit. I think this is pretty straightforward. It has been explained just now. So you need to commit, subscribe to SBTi. Second, you get yourself measured, validated. The panelists has already explained, just now I've elaborated how we measure, how we validate our carbon emission. I think I would like to say more about the third part, which I think is taking action, right? So how do you take action, right? So where do you find carbon to reduce? I think this is something that a lot of businesses are grappling with, right? We can measure, we can validate. How do we cut it, right? We must use energy. How do we decarbonize? So we all know energy constitute about 73% of carbon emission. The rest is, you know, agriculture, forests, and things like that. So the biggest chunk is actually energy. So energy is made out of manufacturing, transportation, and also electricity in buildings, right? So I think if you address the biggest chunk of it, energy, so how do we do it? How to significantly and materially? So a lot of businesses that I see, they are like what Dato' Dennis said, they are buying offset, buying from projects that are already there. So there are only so many projects that can go around, right? The solar farm has been built, you know, the hydro plant has been built, so you are buying. So currently the market is like, I buy from this project, you buy from that project. So there are limited number of projects that can go around. So how do you develop more plants, right, that can offset the carbon that we are producing, or what can you do in the process of your business, be it transportation or energy use? Some companies, they use a lot of energy, for example, manufacturing. So company like the Hydraulic Energy, we call ourselves an energy transition company. So what we do, for example, is we help clients to decarbonize their electricity. So how do we do that? So we work out a roadmap for our customer. Some are very aggressive, some are 5 years roadmap, some are you end at 2025 to achieve net zero. Some are going until 2030 to achieve net zero. Some are less ambitious, they go for 2050. So we've developed a roadmap starting from, could be for a solar panel on your roof. It could be buying green electricity from an offsite plant. So this is not yet available in Malaysia, but we are doing that in Singapore and also in Philippines. So where we can develop a plant and we can view the power to your premise, so you can actually become net zero. You can buy totally carbon-free electricity. So we develop a roadmap using different steps, and depending on the policy of different countries, we take it step by step, because all this need time. So I believe if businesses start early today, it is the competition of developing this kind of solution is not that much. But later on, when you start later, more people are joining in. So the competition, the carbon price, even if you want to buy offset, it may become more expensive, right? So I think businesses should start by committing, and then you will start to work out a solution, right? So I think that's my advice to all the businesses.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tam. So I would like to open the floor to the physical attendees here. So to the hall, if there's any question that you would like to ask. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pearl. I'm from Carlsberg, Malaysia. Big thanks to UNGC for pulling off this good synopsis, as well as sponsors, main sponsors and partners. Over the last 1 hour, I can't help listening a lot of good initiative as well ambition among the B2B. Referring to the recent 12 Malaysia plan, I realized there's a very clear direction on the what we want to achieve, why we are doing so, somehow lacking on the how part. I would like to address this question to Dr. Dennis. In your opinion, how can Malaysia, whether from policymaker perspective or from corporation perspective, create a good ecosystem, if not like a circular community or economy, for us to really drive our step forward as compared to just standards, principles, initiatives? My second question will be for Ms. Adeline. From a consumer perspective, B2C, reading the profile that Dr. have just mentioned, from Kellogg's to Axiata, how exactly as corporation like us can actually drive behavioral change, if not consumer mindset change? Thanks.
Dr. Dennis.
Firstly, I go for the low-hanging fruit. For me, it's really unacceptable to subsidize polluters, to pay people to pollute our country. I think it's totally unacceptable. We are spending, I think, 12 billion on fuel subsidies. which only 4% goes to the B20. If you really need to do it, go for targeted subsidies. It's really unacceptable. The amount of money that we're spending subsidizing polluters, if you put that into the environment, it will help us out. But it's not only that. We also get subsidized gas prices to power producers. Again, why are we subsidizing polluters? You know, not only that, TNB pays 23 cents for renewable energy at the MV level, and I think 31 cents, but most of it's the MV level. So it pays essentially 23 cents for renewable energy, but then it buys from IPPs at just under 40 cents. So why does it buy renewable energy cheaper than it buys for dirty energy? And what happens when it does that? The difference between what it pays and what is needed to make the project viable comes from the cess, which we as all consumers are paying to finance renewable energy. So if TNB pays a higher price for the displaced power, our cess, which we are paying, can go much further. So these, to me, are a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can do. Also, you know, it's very difficult. There's so many good renewable energy projects, but we can't connect to the grid because we have these very antiquated connection laws. You know, so again, you don't have to spend any money. Just open up your mind, really stimulate this sector, and we can really drive a carbon-free economy. So that's the low-hanging fruit, you know. But I think carbon tax is coming, you know, and I think we shouldn't be fearful of it. It can be a good thing, but my only concern is a few, you know. The government really needs to engage the industry so that we understand what it's all about, you know. Don't just suddenly drop it on us, you know. So firstly, help companies to understand, you know, what is their carbon emissions first before you push them with a carbon tax. Then engage with companies so that we know what is coming. Don't suddenly implement it, you know, next month. You know, engage with us. We're going to do it in a progressive way. Do what's done in other countries. Don't just implement it, but do pilots first, you know. So if you look at what is done in China, you know, they did pilots in 6 provinces first. And then when that was done, they introduced a carbon tax, but again, not against the whole economy, but on a selected side of the economy, which is power generation. So do things with trials, do things in a very measured way. And very importantly, for this carbon tax to be effective, do not take that carbon tax and put it into the central pool. You need to take that carbon tax, keep it in a separate fund, and only use it for environmental projects. Don't take that carbon tax and do ... with it. Okay. And lastly, if you go down this path, you've got to be realistic, you know. So the cross-border carbon issues must be taken account. So you can't do it just for our country without looking at the cross-border tax issues as well, you know, cross-border carbon tax issues. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. Don't be fearful of it. There's a lot of opportunity, and I just hope the government takes that very measured and engaging path to go down there.
Thank you, Dato' Dennis. And next we have Miss Evelyn.
All right. So the consumer question, I think, is a very interesting question. You know, a lot of things that we do as part of organizations, you always say, oh, you know, you need the policymakers to play a part, you need the government to do something. But I think when it comes to a consumer's perspective, to a certain extent, it is okay to take policies, you know, as a separate equation, because I think it comes down to us. So Bill Gates, he wrote a new book, and I think interestingly, what he presented is that there is a strong correlation between the earnings per capita of a person versus the amount of energy that's consumed. So we do waste a lot of energy. And then someone also recently, a couple of weeks back, I heard, it was meant as a joke, but I think in many ways it can be true. What this person said is that, you know, if every one of us were to just look at the way we consume our electricity, our energy, how sometimes we just leave our phone chargers running, our air condition running. If we were to all together change that habit as a country, reaching net zero would be possible. You know, you laugh at it, but in many ways it's true. So on a personal level, I think it comes a lot to overconsumption, whether it's electricity or when you are in FMCG, it's always about packaging. You know, how much of plastic, how much do you want to spend in terms of creating packaging that is more recyclable, that is lighter, bottling. But you know, those are not the solutions. At the end of the day, you're still consuming. Whether you recycle it, whether you use less, you are still using. So I think it comes back down to personally, you know, what is your stand on overconsumption? And I also will not say that I'm like the most environmentally person. No, I think when you come to the crossroad of convenience versus doing the right things, more often than not, you will also take the path of convenience. So I think it comes back down to education. It comes back down to education at what level? A lot of times you seem to think that you need to go to schools. You need to go to the younger kids. To a certain extent, it's true. But you know, among us as adults, also I think as we heard just now, the younger generation are also just watching what we are doing. So I think this is a very difficult question to answer. I think I would rather answer a policy question, but you know, this really comes down to us as an individual. And from organizations' perspective, I think, you know, when we look at climate action, when we say that, you know, it's something that we need to address for the society, this is where some of our programs could include environmental education, you know, going right down to schools. And I think most importantly, to enable people to appreciate the environment is to be amidst environment. You know, so how do we bring the mangrove to the school? How do you bring the forest to the school? Biodiversity to schools? You know, how do you get people to appreciate this? So I think those are some of the questions that I don't have a solution, but I think these are some of the things that, you know, organizations can do to create that awareness among everyone. I don't think just children or school kids or university students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Adeline. So perhaps before I move on to the, okay, Mr. Faros, ask question. Okay.
Just a quick one for all the audience. You know, SBTi sometimes comes across very scary for decision makers because, you know, you've got the commit and it's made very publicly available and it's short time boundaries, right? So a question to all the panelists. What is your advice to the sustainability practitioners who wants to get their companies to commit to this? How can they persuade decision makers better? So maybe to Tam and Datuk from a CEO perspective and to Adeline and Irwan from a practitioner perspective, how do you get decision makers committed and convince them that SBTi is the pathway for taking the right climate actions?
Right, let me start. A lot of decision makers, based on what I have experienced before, a lot of the fears come from not being able to achieve, and also coming along with it is the commercial impact, right? The financial result impact, whether they think that if I, use renewable energy, is it more expensive? If I cut my carbon, if I travel, or the mode that I travel become more expensive. So I think that's the main thing in their questions. But we need to, I can speak for energy sector. Nowadays, like Dato' Dennis also mentioned just now, renewable energy is actually cheaper than your conventional energy. So we need to translate this into, being able to give numbers to the decision maker, to the board, right? So we did a study. We did a 5-year study, for example, for a manufacturing plant, a large MNC having, tens of manufacturing plant in China. So we did a 5-year roadmap for them. So the electricity price for year 2022 is this. Your blended energy price is this. So what is your blended energy price in 2025 when you reach net zero? So actually the increase that we simulated is only 3%. So it's actually even lower than in real terms. After you take out the inflation and whatnot, actually it's cheaper, right? So these kind of facts, a lot of people are not aware. So not many people can tell them, right? So if they decided to do something, my advice is, speak to the right people, get the numbers, and you can make decision accordingly.
There's really two approaches to this, okay? It's either top down or bottom up, okay? And we did a very bottom up approach. So we actually worked out what our scope 1, scope 2 emissions were. Then we worked out how to reduce them by 50%. And then so we worked everything out. We're comfortable that we could do it. And then we make the pledge. Yeah. So that's the bottom up approach. Okay. But there's also a top down approach, and there's nothing wrong with a top down approach. So very big corporations say, we're never going to get this done if we do the bottom up approach, because everyone will be too slow. So we just have to the top to say, we are going to do it. And you send the message down to everyone and you force everyone to comply. Okay. So really the first thing is, do you want to take a bottom up or a top down approach? And both are very, very acceptable. And I think with big behemoth sort of institutions, you would take the top bottom up approach, it will never happen. So you do have to take this very aggressive method going from top down. But for organizations like ourselves, and also we're engineers, so we're very calculating and conservative. We do very conservative bottom up approach.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dennis and Ms. Adeline.
Yeah, so I think it's also a lot of the top to bottom approach, because what you find is that once you have signed up, you are not just signing up to a commitment, but internally you are also signing up to change the way we do things internally. So it does allow for a lot more different kind of conversations to happen. You have conversations with someone from procurement, for example, from finance, your technology officer. So the conversation needs to cut across. So if you had not signed up, there would not be a reason to have this conversation. So I think it is a good start. Again, the solutions are not overnight, but then again, it sets a single direction for everyone to move in tandem across the organization. And it also reminds us that we can't do this alone. There's a lot of partnerships that needs to be built, meaningful partnerships. And for everyone in the organization, also every day is something new for you to learn. Because if I don't want to learn about renewables, there is no way I can find a way to meet my net zero target. So it also forces you to learn, to explore, to have conversations, to meet people, and to really understand what is out there in order to, internalize these external targets.
Okay, I think for me, it's quite a scary moment if you don't know where we are in terms of when we do commitment, we don't know where we are. Either we're on the high side of it or on the lower side of it. So it's important for us to understand this, where we are at this moment. I think in terms of approaching, yes, either bottom up to top to bottom approach. It depends on organization behavior, how agile is the company. So it depends on the mindset and so on. So that's basically where how I'm looking at it. In terms of moving forward, I think SBTi is something that defining where we are going, what sort of targets that we should be achieving, and for a corporate, rather than I think I can't remember your name, Miss, mentioned about standards and so on. It's not about what standard to follow. It's about we need to ask whether that standards able to assist us in achieving our vision, right? It's no use just I want ISO, I want these standards, but we don't know how this standard will assist us. It should be the other way around. You understand that our vision, I need these standards to communicate with our top management, to communicate with our board, because they would like to see a structured way to put the figure, as mentioned by Dato just now, right? I think we need to have that. So we need to create an ecosystem. A corporate world need to, okay, don't wait the government to come up with all these policies. All right, the corporate themselves need to understand, because all this will impact our competitiveness, be it power sectors, be it our plantation or consultancy servicing. It will impact our competitiveness. Where are we against Singapore? Then that kind of question we need to ask ourselves if you think about sustainability. And then talking about climate change, the fundamental of it is basically improve our productivity. As long as we improve our productivity, we improve our carbon footprint, right? Productivity tied to technology, tied to behavior change, and so on. So it's nothing new, basically. Just that to look at on another perspective and how we can quantify that. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, panel speakers. We can have one more question from the audience, if there's any. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to the panelists. It was really very insightful, and I can feel the passion from each one of y'all. Because I'm from ACCA, an accounting body, so my question is going to be around reporting and assurance. I think, Erwan, I think you addressed the reporting bit. It starts with your vision. So I'm just going to cover on assurance. I know Sarawak Energy has embarked on SBTi for one of the leaders in SBTi. How prepared are the external assurance in terms of assuring the SBTi targets or some of the key metrics under SBTi? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
I think that question quite difficult for me to answer, because you're asking about how ready external assurer to our SBTi, right? All right. I think for SBTi itself, we're working with auditing firm. They're from one of the auditing firms. They are setting up their own consultancy services as a start, what we call pre-validation. Okay, but assuring the data itself, either the data at operation level or whatever, it varies, because we don't work with so many assurer, because we only work with 2 assurer, because we believe in partnerships. Whatever we do, it should be a long term, where we learn from you, you also learn from us as well, especially if we are dealing with something new. Only then the cost part of it, the trust part of it will come in. We only work with 2, so far, some of the insurer, they are very detailed in their assessment up to plant level, where they do all the sampling and so on. I think these two insurer that we are working with, I think in terms of how in-depth is their assessment, of course, they're adopting certain standards in doing assessment. I think we are quite happy with working with these 2 insurer. On how readiness for others in the market, because this is quite new. I'm not too sure how ready they are, except for these 2.
Okay. All right. Any more comments or from my panel speaker here? Okay. I have a question from the virtual attendee here. So we open to all the panel speakers if anyone would like to answer. How do you manage shareholders' short-term expectations on profit growth? How do you manage shareholders' short-term expectation on profit growth? So, Dr. Dennis, thank you.
I think we mustn't look at climate pledges as just a negative, you know. So yes, I did mention we got quite a big investment that we have to make to achieve our 50% reduction in carbon, but it's not a donation, it's not a CSR. We have to convince our shareholders that it's a viable investment with a reasonable ROI, and you know, so that's why I say don't look at this purely as a punitive tax, but look at it also as an opportunity. So all of the things that we do fit within a viable financial framework, you know, So I repeat, you can do good business doing good. It is not mutually exclusive.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dennis, for sharing your insight. Any other opinion?
I think just like to add, growth is something quite interesting to me. Looking at growth itself, all these requirements will become future requirements. All right, we experience it now from our potential customer. They start asking whether our energy meets certain requirement or not. Whether once our plant operated, we meet the 1.5 degrees C targets or not. All this question is coming to us now. So for us, basically, that's the requirement for growth. If the company are unable to elevate or improve their performance toward a certain standards, be it climate, be it other sustainability requirement, then it's quite difficult for us to go tapping the growth. The financiers start putting all this requirement in. Bank Negara, all this, our Sukuk investors, for example, they start asking us how we manage this risk. So we predict this will be another 3 to 5 years will be the main requirement for companies in assessing financing. So for a company, understand this and try to chart your way forward. That's the point I would like to add. Thank you.
Maybe I'll just add on. Yeah, I think short-term growth and sustainability sometimes don't go hand in hand because when you say something about being sustainable, it's always long-term growth. It's not that you're going to see something good coming out of it in the next 1 to 2 years. But what is good is that climate change is real. You see it. And there's also a lot of movement now around managing climate risk. So that's where you start doing the TCFD and all. And the outcomes of all this exercise is really the fact that if you don't do anything, the cost of not doing anything is more than doing something. So I think it will come down to that. The cost is not going to get less, but it will force you to make decisions. And not all of it will enable you to also see growth. So I think that's the beauty or the non-beauty of sustainability is that, it's about balancing and it's really about making those decisions.
Okay, so thank you, panel speakers. We have come to the end of this session. So I would like to conclude by saying that, yes, there can be challenges, but there are also lots of opportunities. So what corporates can do is that we must take action now, commit, and you will then work out a solution to all these challenges. So thank you, panel speakers, Mr. Irwan, Ms. Adeline, Mr. Tam, and Dr. Dennis. Thank you.
Wow, that was truly an insightful session. Can I kindly request the speakers to remain on stage for a group photo session? Thank you so much, Mr. Irwan, Dr. Dennis, Mr. Tam, Ms. Adeline, and Dr. Farah. You may return to your seats. Okay, so we'll now take a 5 minutes break and we'll continue at after 5 minutes for the final part of our session for today, where we'll hear from the team at UNFCCC and Climate Champions. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start now. Can kindly remain to your seats and we'll begin our next session. Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are enjoying yourself so far and have gotten some key insights on how to embark on your next steps for SBTi. So now I would like to invite Ms. Danielle Magalhaes, who currently leads the stakeholder engagement team in the Global Climate Action Program of the UNFCCC. In this session, Danny will be speaking about non-state actors' ambitious climate action on the road from COP26 to COP27. What is their role and how can they support this process? So over to you, Danny.
I hope you hear me well. Yes?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Good afternoon to all in Malaysia and Brunei. And good morning, good evening to the other participants and audience. I would like to thank the organizers for making this event happen and having me here again following the technical event in February. I also thank the audience for attending this significant event and stay until now to explore the pathways to achieve net zero emissions and strengthen the resilience of community by following science-based targets. Climate change remains the most significant, alarming, and rapidly escalating crisis facing humanity, with the most vulnerable being hardest hit. This has been confirmed with the latest IPCC report on climate change released yesterday. We have a great challenge ahead to keep the increased average temperature to 1.5 degrees. For this, we need immediate action and cut emissions by half by 2030. After the agreements made at COP26, 2022 is a critical year for the international response to climate change, perhaps the most critical since COP21 in Paris, as we move to the implementation phase of the Paris Agreement. COP26 was an extremely productive summit, but as any other multilateral agreement process, also not perfect. The outcomes, if met, still do not bring us as close as we need to meet the 1.5 degree target at the end of the century. However, we were much closer than before, as COP26 has kept the 1.5 target alive. So there is nevertheless much work to be done to achieve it. We also came out of Glasgow with a lot of clarity on where we need to work across the areas of adaptation, mitigation, and finance. Efforts were strengthening to build resilience to climate change, curb greenhouse gas emissions, and provide the necessary finance for both. For the first time, nations were called upon and agreed to phase down unabated coal power and inefficient subsidies for fossil fuels. Parties completed the Paris Agreement's rulebook relating to transparent reporting of climate emissions, carbon market mechanisms, and support for loss and damage, which will help to increase the pace of implementing the Paris Agreement. And it was highlighted strongly than ever at COP26 that non-party stakeholders or non-state actors, such as business like yourselves, and also civil society, financial institutions, local governments, non-governmental organizations are key to driving the ambition, innovation, and action we need to bring emissions down to the net zero target that many countries have committed. During COP26, a 5-year plan for an improved Marrakesh partnership established by the high-level champions of the UNFCCC process was welcomed by the parties of the convention and the parties of the Paris Agreement and will be implemented in the next years. The plan focuses on specific priorities, including supporting non-party stakeholders to drive systems transformation, enhance regionalization with focus on developing countries, and strengthening their collaboration with parties or with national governments. Outside of the negotiation process, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres announced that the UN will establish a group of experts to propose clear standards to measure and analyze net zero commitments of non-state actors. And this expert group on the net zero emissions commitments of non-state entities has officially been launched last week, aiming to create minimum standards on net zero for all non-party stakeholders to ensure credibility. The high-level champions with the Race to Zero experience will be collaborating with this work. With all these outcomes, what we're looking now towards COP27 is for increased action by all. For COP27 to be a success, parties will need to do a step forward, and action by non-party stakeholders will be essential to help move in this engine, in what we have been calling an ambition loop. As the UN Secretary General said, governments have the lion's share of responsibility to achieve net zero emissions by mid-century. But we also urgently need every business, investor, city, state, and region to walk the talk and on their net zero promises. The viability of our societies doesn't depend only on leaders from government, but also on what is happening at the real economy, on the ground with the business, cities, regions, and investors and civil society, uniting behind policies, actions, and investments that will limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. This will in turn enable governments to go further and faster in their efforts to decarbonize, activating the positive ambition loop between state and non-state actors. The Marrakesh Partnership is an integral way of activating this ambition loop. Launched by the high-level champions who were appointed in the Paris Agreement to enhance climate action, the partnership supports implementation of the Paris Agreement by enabling collaboration between governments and non-state actors towards climate change. And this will continue to be one of the central roles underpinning the 2022 work program of the Marrakesh Partnership, which has been launched last week at the MENA Climate Week in Dubai, which focus on strengthening and mainstreaming resilience, financing climate action, accelerating immediate climate action, and building credibility and trust in non-party stakeholders' action. The champions also aim to support non-party stakeholder data and analytics from communities at the global and regional levels, and encourage them to work together to provide consolidated inputs into the global stocktake portal, which assesses the collective progress towards achieving the purpose of the Paris Agreement and its long-term goals. To catalyze the step change in global ambition for climate action, the champions have launched and will continue to strengthen the two campaigns, Race to Zero and Race to Resilience. The Race to Zero campaign, our main subject of the discussion afterwards, which Fiona will talk more about it, mobilized a coalition of leading net zero initiatives representing over 9,000 institutions, including more than 7,000 private companies and financial institutions. The Race to Resilience aims to catalyze action by non-state actors that builds the resilience of 4 billion people from vulnerable groups and communities to climate risks by 2030. This has sent a strong signal that non-state actors are united in meeting the Paris Agreement goals and creating a more inclusive and resilient economy, and that the transformation is on the way towards a future enabled by zero carbon recovery that will prevent future threats, create decent jobs, and unlock inclusive, sustainable growth. This journey towards the net zero emission future by 2050 requires that every business and investment decision and decisions we take on a day-by-day basis as individuals need to be through a climate lenses. 1.5 degrees fundamental, but these long-term commitments must go hand in hand with concrete and credible short and medium-term actions, plans, and targets, which allow the tracking and reporting of success so that innovations and solutions can be shared globally, in particular with actors in developing countries. Business models, assets owners, and managers need to be adjusted to achieve their targets in support of the goals of the Paris Agreement. Efforts to accelerate decarbonization remain key, and mitigation action must be combined with adaptation practice to build resilience and tackle current and future impacts of climate change. Business must ensure their transition to net zero, must be a just transition which leaves not one behind, by involving workers, consumers, and partners across the full value chain in discussions on tackling this global challenge in a spirit of radical collaboration, and implementing both measures to reduce the impact of job losses and industry phase out on workers and communities, and measures to produce new, green, and decent jobs for workers and healthy solutions for communities. In conclusion, the Paris Agreement is about collective goals. It is only by all of us working together that it can be realized, and we can accelerate a sustainable transition to net zero, climate resilient, and healthy future. To achieve this transformation, we need all of you on board. So thank you so much for being here today and doing this first step into the race. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dani. Now, I would like to invite our final speaker of the day, Ms. Fiona Macklin, Race to Zero Campaign Manager of Climate Champions team. Fiona currently leads the Race to Zero campaign, steering the campaign strategy and working closely with Race to Zero partners and members on the campaign's criteria consultation. In her session, Fiona will be speaking about the Race to Zero campaign and how the SBTi complements this campaign. So over to you, Fiona.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here and then a privilege to be able to speak. Dani, that said, it's always a hard job coming after you and your wonderful presentation. So I hope I can complement and build on what you've been saying. But it's really brilliant to be here to join you today, especially for what sounds like it's been a fantastic symposium so far. Very sad not to be with you all in person, but it's wonderful to see a hybrid audience both online and in the room. And today, yes, exactly, I'm excited to share with you a bit more about the Race to Zero, and in particular how the Science Based Targets Initiative is really helping to accelerate our campaign's priorities and goals this year. So perhaps for those of you who are not quite so familiar with Race to Zero, who might not have been able to join the technical session a couple of weeks ago, what is the Race to Zero? As Dani mentioned before me, this is a UN-backed campaign that is really rallying non-state actors from across the global economy, so companies, cities, regions, financial institutions, all to take really rigorous and immediate action to halve global emissions within this decade. We've got 8 years left by 2030 to do that, and to deliver a healthier, fairer, and zero carbon world in time. We've seen huge momentum over the past 2 years now, growing in commitments, and the SBTi, with its campaign, the Business Ambition for 1.5 degrees, has been phenomenal in driving that growth, in bringing members to the starting line, so that we're now at over 10,000 non-state actors as part of the campaign that together represent over 11% of greenhouse gas emissions and over 15% of the global economy. So really huge numbers, growing exponentially and demonstrating that those who are not signing up will be left behind. Importantly, all these members are racing towards the same goal, and that is reducing emissions across all scopes, swiftly and fairly, in line with the science. And the Science Based Targets Initiative has really helped to strengthen that robust science-based goals and pathways that we need to achieve so that we can reach our goals. And this campaign is led, as Danny mentioned, by our two high-level champions, Nigel Topping for COP26 from the UK and Dr. Mahmoud Mohyeldin from Egypt. And they are really the figureheads, but they're leading this campaign that is mobilizing actors across the global economy in radical collaboration. So this is about working together. And that's exactly how Race to Zero is structured. It's an umbrella campaign, and it's bringing together leading coalitions and initiatives who themselves are managing their individual members to meet the criteria of the campaign. So Business Ambition for 1.5 degrees, which was a campaign within the Science Based Targets Initiative supported by the UN Global Compact, and by We Mean Business, has been absolutely central to focusing on midterm targets and getting companies to align with science-based pathways towards the next 10, 15 years. And now it's particularly exciting to see the launch, well, last October already now, of the net zero standard to set that end goal, the 2050 science-based pathway that we need to follow in order to reduce emissions to the extent needed. So it's fantastic and really leading in our campaign to have both that short-term goal and the long-term vision that is now a clear pathway towards achieving that success. So why does it matter? Well, it's very much about this aligning with the science that I keep talking about. And it's been mentioned, I'm sure, before. Of course, we've seen the latest IPCC report that came out yesterday on Monday, concluding that to have a 50% chance of meeting either a 1.5 or even under 2 degree goal limit of global warming, greenhouse gases will have to peak in the next 3 years by 2025, and fossil fuels will have to be phased down at unprecedented speed and scale. And this window of opportunity is closing incredibly quickly. So all actors of society need to address this transition. And so that's why we need to bring together, with the leadership of all our partner initiatives, these non-state actors, these companies, these cities, these regions, to help us achieve those goals and rapidly reduce emissions in line with that pathway that we need to follow. I think what's particularly fantastic about the Science Based Targets Initiative within Race to Zero is its ability and what it's done to map out the pathways to address these challenges for companies to follow. So not only is it setting the clear requirements that we need to see companies meet in order to achieve those goals, but also with its sectoral methodologies, with its support and approving targets, it's providing the necessary guidance for those companies to achieve their targets. We can't just expect something from companies and then not give them any support. And so the Science Based Targets Initiative, with its sectoral methodologies, with its clear pathways in the net zero standard, is really providing that guidance and that clarity for companies. So why should your business join Race to Zero through the Science Based Targets Initiative? Well, it's all about opportunities. Non-state actors that act now will become and are already becoming leaders in their field, in their sector, in their region, and they're future-proofing their businesses. They are attracting young talent. They're attracting the graduates who are leaving university and only want to work for the companies that are in line and that have set clear science-based targets. But they're also joining a network and a community of members from whom to learn and to work with across supply chains, across value chains, to really achieve these targets. The final, or not the final, but another example of why it's important to join is that the investor community is increasingly aligning around this. This is attracting opportunities for funding, opportunities for your business to attract investment. And it's really clear that those entities that are setting science-based targets, that are having their targets approved, really are the ones that are taking the opportunities to speak at conferences, to speak at events, to be spotlighted as case studies. So really, really important to join, because it's science aligned, but also opens up a whole world of opportunities. So I've spoken about how to join and why to join, or rather I've spoken about what it is and why to join, but how can you actually join? So all members in the Race to Zero need to meet the starting line criteria, which is to pledge at the head of organization level to achieve net zero as soon as possible, and by 2050 at the very latest. And within that, to set an interim target towards contributing your fair share of halving emissions by 2030. You also need to set a plan. And in the case of SBTi, this is setting your target and having it approved along those science-based pathways. You then need to proceed and take immediate action. Let's not kick the can down the road and leave this to the responsibility of younger generations. This is about our chance and our responsibility to do what we need to do now. And finally, it's about publishing. It's about demonstrating clear progress and showing how your business is achieving both its short-term and long-term targets. And across all those 4 Ps, as we call them, we require members to cover all scopes of emissions and make sure that targets are focused on absolute emissions reductions, not relying purely on offsets to cancel out existing emissions. So really important to be focused on those minimum robust science-aligned criteria. Finally, just what I wanted to share is that joining Race to Zero and joining through the Science-Based Targets Initiative, you will be aligning and supporting our priorities for this year, which are of course very closely aligned between the Science-Based Targets Initiative and Race to Zero. So on the one hand, we need to keep building momentum through regionalization, and it's fantastic to be here at the symposium today to make sure that we are bringing in entities, businesses from Malaysia and from Brunei and from all across the world. But also we need to diversify the sectors that are represented, make sure that all sectors across the global economy are joining this campaign to transition and transform their systems. Aside from still building this momentum, it's critical to now focus and hone in on the delivery. We need to see these systems transformations, and it's working with the Science-Based Targets Initiative and their sectoral pathways alongside the Climate Champions 2030 breakthroughs that we will achieve this systems transformation. We also need to work together with our partners to support their members in taking that meaningful action and really addressing the challenges that face them. And then it's also really critical that we start to see companies aligning their policy, their advocacy with their net zero operations. And so making sure that this is really providing integrity to net zero commitments. The third piece that we're focusing on is mobilizing capital. We have to drive funds towards emerging markets to really build resilience and adapt whilst we continue to mitigate. And the SBTi is currently developing its financial methodology. It's fantastic to see the SBTi leading on this. And of course, we'll be working closely to understand how we continue to transition finance, but also finance this transition across the world. And finally, it's always about continuing to further build the credibility and integrity of the campaign. And so working with our partner initiatives, with the SBTi to continue driving this upward convergence towards best practice, understanding what guidance we can further provide our members and how we can continue to clarify what is required of them to achieve these critical goals that we need to achieve within the next year, 2 years, 5 years, and by 2030, and then of course by 2050 at the very latest. So with that, huge thanks, and I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Before we wrap up, I would like to take 1 to 2 questions from the audience if you have any. Let's see if there's any questions from the virtual audience. Okay, same, there's no. All right, so thank you so much once again for your time today, Danny and Fiona, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. So please give a round of applause to our speakers, Danny and Fiona again. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of this session. Thank you again to all of our speakers who are here with us today. For the speakers who are present physically, we would like to present a token of appreciation to you. May I now invite Mr. Farouz to come on stage to present the token of appreciation. Sponsors, I will call you one by one on stage to receive the token, and may I request you to kindly remain on stage for the final photo section. So once again, thank you to Mr. Mohammad Nazrul, Group CEO of PGV Holdings Berhad. Thank you, Mr. Nazrul. Mr. Muhammad Irwan, Head of Sustainability of Sarawak Energy. Thank you, Irwan. So, Dr. Dennis, CEO of MIM Consult Sendirian Berhad. Thank you, Dr. Dennis. Mr. Tam Chi An, Group CEO of Diatronic Energy Holdings. Miss Edwin Anthony, Head of Sustainability of Axiata Group Berhad. Thank you, Ms. Adeline. And last but not least, Dr. Farah, Senior Lecturer of Faculty of Business and Law of Taylor's University. Thank you, Dr. Farah. So now may I invite all the speakers up on stage again to have a group photo. Thank you so much, everyone. You may now return to your seats. Please give a big round of applause to our speakers again. With that, we have come to the end of our SBTi Symposium. We have covered a multitude of topics today, and I hope you will take home with you today's discussion and sharing to further build on what you already have in mind. for your companies. Thank you for being such a lovely audience today. So please give yourself a big round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, we may think that the year 2050 is very far away, but is it really? We are already in 2022 and we only have 28 years to go. If you are 30 today, 2050 will be when you are 58 years old. So with the issue of climate change worsening, there is no time to play the blame game and point fingers at everyone. And we should no longer measure our wealth and success in the graph that only shows economic growth, but also the emission of greenhouse gases. With this, I would like to take the opportunity to encourage all of you leaders here today to set ambitious science-based targets. Lastly, I would like to